My first question to you is really, I want to understand something about your childhood here because I
Okay.
didn't see a lot of information on this. And really, all I want to understand is what do I need to know about you as a child that helps me understand what you've been able to do, achieve, and create as Yolanda yourself and also under the brands that you've worked with and created in your career? What's the
Uh,
correlation there?
wow. Well, I could tell you that I was a really creative child. I'm an introvert and I was also extremely shy, so shy to the point that when I first started kindergarten, about 3 or 4 months in, the teacher called my mom and asked her why she didn't share the fact that I was obviously mute because I had never said a word. And my mother said, "What are you talking about? Of course she can talk." And it wasn't until I don't even know when the timeline, but apparently a boy, my mom used to braid my hair, a boy pulled my braid. And that was the day I stood up and said, "Don't do that again." And it was the first time my teacher heard me speak. So it's odd that I've ended up in front of the camera because I'm the last person who would have expected that. I wasn't aiming for that or hoping for that in any way. That was my worst fear. But I was very creative. In fact, there was a show that I used to love when I was a kid. It was called Mr. Dress Up. And it was a gentleman and a bunch of puppets, as 80s TV's children's shows are. And there was always a craft time in the half hour slot. He always made a craft. So I made my parents save every toilet paper roll, every paper towel roll. I had pipe cleaners and glue sticks, you name it all. And I had this little sort of kit. And I couldn't wait till Mr. Dress Up came on so that I could make whatever he was making that day. And when I was young, I was always allowed to express myself creatively. My mother is not a creative, but my dad certainly was creative. And so I could freely express myself. I grew up in an apartment, but when we finally moved to a house and I had my own room, I was allowed to redecorate, paint it any way I wanted. It was like my space, and I was
Amazing.
allowed I know a lot of parents would stop that because kids have crazy ideas. When I was 12, I wanted to paint my room bubblegum pink, like literally Hubba Bubba original flavor pink. And I was allowed to do that. I outgrew that kind of quickly. So I've always felt most comfortable expressing myself creatively as opposed to verbally.
And
And
what would you say, what did you want to be growing up when you were that young? Like, what was going through your mind at that point?
I don't remember knowing exactly. I would say growing up in the school system, it wasn't really expressed to me that art could be an option. So even though I knew I wanted to be an artist, it always seemed unrealistic. Like the back of my mind kept thinking, what am I going to be? A painter or a sculptor? But those are all the things that I loved doing. Even when I went to high school, unfortunately, I had a great high school experience. I went to an all girls Catholic school. But when I entered grade 9, so at this point I was 14,
Hmm.
I was forced to choose only one art. So I had to choose visual art or music. And at the time in elementary school, I could play the clarinet. And so I chose visual. I would have done both. That's what I'm trying to say. I would have taken every art possible. In fact, I took summer school courses and took like creative writing, anything that there was really, but there wasn't a lot. Now I know school is much better. A lot of my friends' kids take all kinds of art and even cooking and baking in high school, which was not an option for me. So at the end of high school, at the time, high school was 5 years. So by then it was 19. I was going to apply to OCAD, which is the Ontario College of Art and Design. And the application process meant that you had to create this whole portfolio of whatever art you were into, painting, sculpture, photography, anything. And I talked myself out of it. And I had major imposter syndrome. And I was just scared of the entire process, from thinking that my work was good enough in the first place to standing in front of the professors and having to talk about it. I
Yeah,
mean, I
that's
was
your real
so
uncomfort zone,
That
not comfort.
was when I was in high school, I used to opt out of speeches and take like the percentage hit to my grade because that's how terrifying it was to me.
That's amazing.
So,
Yeah.
were you at any point sculpting? Because I look at your work now, and I was talking to Haf before we jumped on the podcast call with you. It was just like, I was like, she must have been like she must have been doing something with her hands creatively,
Yeah,
or
I even suggested maybe you were just a whiz with Play-Doh back then as a starting
Yeah.
point. I don't know.
Yeah, I loved,
paper mache
Play-Doh.
or something.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I loved it all. Play-Doh, plasticine. So the college that I wanted to attend when I was young, my mom saved up and actually sent me to camp there. And that's one of my most vivid memories because I just loved the experience. And we did all kinds of art, all kinds, printmaking, you name it. We just dabbled. And I was just I was probably 8 then. I even still have a painting that I painted at that age, and I keep telling myself I'm gonna stretch it over a canvas frame and hang it. But when I hit 19 and then I chickened out applying, I decided to go to culinary school. And so here in Toronto, the top culinary school is, or at the time it was, George Brown. They didn't have any cake decorating courses. They had baking and pastry, which was really just for a certificate. And it was an 8-month course at the time. And then they had what I signed up for, which was called culinary management. It was a 2-year program, but it was cooking, a little bit of baking, and then it was learning how to own a restaurant. So, like bookkeeping, accounting, ordering, all that kind of stuff, all the behind the scenes stuff. And so I really loved the experience because I think it was the first time I was in school and felt like I knew something.
Mhm.
And what I've come to discover, especially by, you know, this age is I'm much better with my hands. I'm a doer. I learned by doing and trying. And I wouldn't say elementary school and high school really offered me that. It's more read it in a book, write notes, memorize. And
Yeah,
I just
sure.
never felt comfortable with that. I did fine. I, I, I did well. I wasn't an overachiever in that arena at all. But when it came to art class was always my highest grade by far. And I didn't feel like I was trying. And it was the one grade I cared the most about because I just never felt good enough. And that has transferred into my cake life as well. I constantly feel like that. Um, but culinary school is when it really opened my eyes to who I was and what I like doing, that this could be an actual path. We only did a little baking. So we baked some bread, a few pies. I think we made a cake, but it wasn't decorated by any means.
But was this
And
sorry, was this your dad's suggestion at all? I mean, he's the one who had the baking trade experience, and you've
yes,
obviously saw that growing
yeah.
up. But did he push you, or did you connect the dots and go, "Well, I could do what maybe dad's doing," or how did that come about as option B?
Well, he didn't push me at all. If anything, he helped me. So my father was a baker by trade because growing up in the small town in Germany where he's from, it was the kind of academic system that if you didn't have a certain grade point, you picked a trade, right? They were very practical about this. And the funny thing is, he wanted to be a wrought iron sculptor, and his parents felt that wasn't a realistic choice and that he should pick something realistic like baking. And so he did. And so in my house, everything that was baked by my father. My mother makes a few things from her culture, but it was just literally a couple of things on repeat, which I love. And so when I got to the university grade level and I wanted to go to college, my mom was actually upset because my mom comes from a small island, Grenada, and she, left Grenada on a boat for 9 days to England to become a midwife. It was a time period where, as a woman, there weren't many options for you to go to school. And so she was, I won't say disappointed, but I think she was shocked that I, as a born Torontonian, had university at my fingertips and I just wasn't interested. I mean, even now at 46, if you told me I could have a scholarship to university, I don't know what I would do. I would go to art college. Anything with my hands, I would love to do. But if you told me to go to university and take a course, I still don't know what it would be. And so my mom was rather upset, wanted me to go to university and then go to cooking school. It's my father who stood up for me and said, if this is what she wants, then let her go.
God.
And it was absolutely the right path. And I do not regret it at all.
No. I can understand that totally. I feel like it's just such a very interesting point in inflection point in your life where, and you've got a few of these we'll discuss, but here's one where, you know, if you hadn't have done it this way, who knows what would have happened. It's just like the timing of making sure that this is where she's going to shine. Let's just push her down that path a little bit and let her
Mhm.
just figure it out. And you were in the right school at the right time, it sounded like, to just allow you to open up. I mean, obviously, they understood your insecurities about being in front of people and being shy growing up and such. So maybe they saw something in this environment where it may work and you didn't have to do anything like that for a little while, I'm assuming, until later before you start presenting your own work. Did you did that happen quite early on in culinary school where you had to showcase a little bit and be a bit more outwardly with your talent? And how did you adjust?
Well, yeah, I mean, daily, what we would do is we would watch the chefs cook one day, and then the next day would be our turn. And we would be graded on everything, how we worked, how clean our station was, the timing, and then, of course, the execution and the taste. And so you had to clean up, present, and the teacher would walk around. Not to mention, I have to say, I mentioned I went to an all girls high school. So I went to culinary school in 1996.
Okay.
And I went from being only around girls for 5 years of my life into a course that was predominantly boys. I was one of five girls. There was no Food Network. So when you were in the chef world, it was definitely male dominated. So there also was a bit of a competitive feeling in the air. And I really didn't enjoy that. I'm also not a competitive person at all. I'm not athletic in any way. And so I felt pressured because I'm a perfectionist. I wanted to execute every dish perfectly. But then I really didn't like other students walking around judging each other
Yeah.
and the egotistical nature of it. I did not enjoy that, but it did force me to come out of my shell, stand up for myself. I remember in second year, we had to do a competition where we made a plated dessert. And I was so excited. I still have pictures of it. I was so excited to be able to express myself like that because it was baking, it was creative. You had to decorate the plate and everything. And I still remember what I made a little butterfly, I made a moose dome. And then I made wings out of chocolate. And then I painted the plate with chocolate. So it looked like, I'm sorry, not a butterfly, a ladybug. It looked like a ladybug in the middle of your plate, and I drew
Oh,
some
wow.
flowers and colored them in with gel, and I ended up winning the competition, and that was so validating to me, and at that point, we had to pick a co-op. We had to get hours towards our grade, and so I actually went to the dean, and I asked for permission to do my co-op placement at a bakery because remember, I was in culinary school, so
Yeah.
I should have picked a restaurant. There was a whole list of restaurants in the city that participated. And I basically asked for permission to go to a baking co-op, like the baking students would. And he allowed me to do that. And I I now think how bold of me, because I was still very shy then. It was more just the thought of chopping onions all day. That was not my jam. I knew I wanted to bake and do something creative. So my first co-op placement was a bakery in Toronto. And as soon they hired me, they actually hired me. So I would do my co-op and then they hired me and I worked on weekends. And as soon as I graduated, they hired me and I ended up working there for like 3.5 years. And I got to work at every single station. A lot of people don't know how a bakery works behind the scenes. It's very different than a cake shop because they made all types of baked goods. So there was a gentleman who just made pies, pie fillings, and pie doughs. There was a gentleman who just manned the oven because they had 6 stacked ovens and he was responsible for the timing. There was a gentleman who just made fillings, buttercreams. Then there was the cake decorating station, which is when I got there, I fell in love and there was no way I was going to leave.
God,
And
what?
so by the time I had worked there about 3 years in, I could ice 120 cakes in a day, but they didn't do fondant, nothing like that. They
Right,
just had a
right.
menu of different cakes. I'd get a chart, printed chart every day, and it would say this many chocolate cakes, this many lemon, this many vanilla, blah, blah, blah. And I cannot even express how much I loved it. I just felt instantly like I found the thing I wanted to do. And my bosses would decorate wedding cakes. not again, once again, they were all buttercream, not fondant. And it got to the point where I was good enough that they would let me ice the wedding cakes and then assist them in the decorating. And that's when I really knew that's what I wanted to do. I even encouraged them and asked them if we could work with fondant. They weren't interested in doing that. And so that's when I started my cake book collection, which were all very expensive and imported. That's all I would ever ask for Christmas and my birthday. And I just started to make cakes on my own at home. And back then, I really can't believe what has happened in the cake world because back then I had to trek out of the city to even buy fondant. I would ask my cousins in London to send me cake decorating tools. There was no Amazon. So it was really, it's so interesting now because I ate, slept, and breathed cake decorating, but it wasn't popular. So when I was young and I would go to a club and I would meet people and they say, "Hey, what do you do for a job?" And I'd say, "Oh, I make sculpted cakes." People would look at me funny because no one said that.
No, not
And
at
now
all.
I live in a world where everyone knows cake decorating. And even if they don't decorate cakes, they watch it on TV or their mother or their cousin or they've been presented with a decorated cake. But back then, it was odd to say
Uh,
what I did, especially at my age, at my very young age at the time. And boy, has the world changed because cake decorating is just at your fingertips everywhere you look.
So what I was going to jump in and say, it was like, what a great exposure that you had. It's almost like you went on an intensive graduate program where you got a placement into all the different, every single different angle in bakery business that is actually possible. So you're learning everything on the job. And it's like a dream. It'll be like a dream for me actually to go and learn everything intensive, but not be committed to one role, so that you had this motion where you were going from station to station, learning the skills, going, yeah, I like that, but teach me something else, teach me something else. And when you got to cakes, it's almost like icing 120 is no mean feat either. But it's like when you got to cakes, it was like that's where the excitement came and something clicked in you. This whole journey from going to culinary school, going through that whole process, gaining that confidence as well, confidence in yourself. You touched on earlier that you've always had this feeling of not feeling good enough. And then all of a sudden to become best in class, then to get this amazing placement and then become leading on the wedding cakes and cake designing. Like your confidence must have been really blossoming at this time. Was that the same internally as externally as well? Were you getting more vocal? Were you getting more secure in yourself and what you could do and your abilities?
Um, I don't think it was externally. I was still quiet. And I mean, Rachel is like being a cake decorator is like being siloed. I just felt like I was on my own island making cakes. And then I only had to see people. I made cakes by appointment. So people would come and see me and I would discuss what they wanted. And it was always a big occasion like bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, birthday, maybe something corporate, weddings, of course. So that's when I had to speak to people. And even then, I felt really shy, especially as the years went on. I mean, I made cakes in this city for 12 years before I was ever on TV. And I really, in all honesty, never charged enough. I never charged enough because, especially like I said back then, there was such little exposure to the world of cake decorating and how labor intensive it is. So the general public just thinks, "Oh, I want a cake. I want it to look pretty." But at the end of the day, I'm going to eat it. I can't keep it. So they often don't want to pay for it. And that's really difficult, especially in the time when I'd have brides bring me, for example, a picture of JLo's wedding cake in style weddings. And they would want that cake. And those magazines were very good. It was all about how bougie everything is. So those magazines would state the price that JLo paid, right? So you would see $5,000. And I'd have brides who had a $300 Canadian budget and they would want that cake. So it's so difficult because here I was trying to build a portfolio, especially back then, no Instagram, nothing. So
Right.
the cakes that I made were my portfolio. I took pictures. When I delivered them, I'd ask the photographers on site if they would take a picture for me because I knew they would be better. So I was just building a portfolio. So it was this teeter-totter between, I know I'm not charging enough, but I also know this is what I love doing, and hopefully I'll just keep climbing the ladder until I can charge enough, right? But looking back, and even now, like when I do live Q&As for one of my master classes. We just do it on Zoom and people can ask me whatever they want. Most of the questions have to do with my cake decorating career prior to YouTube and how I did it and what I charged. And I know that cake decorators, even in 2023, are struggling with that. So that's a little disheartening for me, but it is the reality
It's a topic that
of the
comes
job.
up time and time again around
Yeah.
pricing and
Oh, we were always talking to bakers about it
yeah,
here.
and I think it's something that the more we keep talking about it, the better the situation will be for a lot of bakers and giving them the right skills and tips and ways that they can start to charge and have that confidence to charge. I think a lot of it comes back to being on your own in the bakery business as well, and then having those comments thrown at you all the time, like, gosh, that's so expensive. That's so expensive. And we've talked about a few times being comparison to supermarket cakes, but a lot of it is an education back with the customers because they don't realize how long these cakes take. If you told one of their customers that was coming in for their J-Lo inspired wedding cake all those years ago that actually to make this wedding cake, it's going to take me a good 20 hours. So do the maths, right? Otherwise, I'll go work at McDonald's.
Yeah.
It's very true. I think also you're going off of not just very little foundation of business training or anything like that back then. You don't have much else back then in the way of necessarily tools, utensils, advanced equipment, decorating elements. You are coming up with this stuff on your own and figuring out what you can do with the tools that were presented to you at the time. Like you're saying, you're having to source all over the world to get stuff if and when you maybe read about something in a magazine or whatnot. So my question at this point of your life is, who was inspiring you as you were learning and growing your personal capability? Was there somebody that you were following, or was there a magazine or a person or a baker or a celebrity? Where did you get inspiration from back then?
Well, there was no following because I mean, we're talking 2001, 2000. So there was
Yeah.
no following of any kind. I loved and just recently at SoFlo, this last SoFlo, got to meet one of my cake idols, Colette Peters. I have all of her books, and I actually got to judge the cake competition with her. And that was
Oh.
such a full circle moment for me. Colette Peters, I love Mike McCary. I love Debbie Brown. And like I said, I used to go in Toronto. There used to be a store called the Cookbook Store, and it was right across the street from the biggest library in Toronto. I would go in there, and they had imported books, and they had a whole section that was just baking and cake decorating. And I would go in and just look at the books and then put it on my wish list. So my parents would buy it for me when the time came. And then I would also go to Indigo, which is like our Barnes and Noble, and look at the imported magazines like Squire's Kitchen. And so when I was 21, my father actually passed away after I finished college and started collecting those Squire's Kitchens magazines. And my mom decided after a hard time, she would send to Squire's Kitchen and I could take a couple of courses. I think I took 3. My great aunt, my grandmother's sister lived in London, so I just went, stayed with her and my cousins, and then I took the train to Squire's Kitchen and I took a few courses that were like sugar flowers. And once again, I was in a position where it was so lovely. It was just a room full of women sitting around a big square table, the instructor, and we focused on this one little project for 2 or 3 days. And again, especially after working in a bakery, that was the second time that I had that feeling like, oh, I'm home. Like, this is real. This is what I'm supposed to do. I think that was a life changing experience for me, especially like while I was processing grief. It was the greatest experience, and I ended up staying in London for, like, 3 months. I was supposed to go for 2 weeks. Didn't wanna leave my family. I think it was just a bit of trying to escape the
Yeah.
sadness of being home.
Yeah.
So I ended up staying for 3 months, and I had the most wonderful time, and it really solidified my belief that this is what I wanted to do.
And at that point, were you starting to branch out a lot on your own? Did you move away from the bakery business?
I still worked at the bakery because it was a steady income. When I think about it now, though, like I would work 6 days a week. I'd get up at 5 a.m., go to work. I often worked 16-hour days. If it was a holiday, 20 hours. And then I would come home, make a cake for anyone who would take it. So if it's my friend's birthday, my cousin's birthday, anyone's, I am making you a cake. And I would do that sort of after hours. And then, of course, I was young and I live in a city. So I'd be going out with my friends like 3 to 4 nights a week. I don't know how, just saying that sentence made me tired. I don't know how I did it, but my whole life was just caking and then having fun with my friends. Mm. It,
It's
it was such a
incredible when you look
wonderful
back.
time. And I didn't know it would lead here. I never knew it would lead here. My number one dream, though, in collecting all those cake books was to have my own cake book. And especially as I kept on caking and really developing my own creative style and point of view, I wanted to express that. I love the finality of a book. There's just something about it that I really love, and I always wanted that. And so I just kept making as many cakes as I could and thinking one day I'd be good enough to put them in a book.
Manifesting at such an younger age, right? But it's amazing what you can do, I think, in your 20s when you've got lots of energy and time. But I'm curious, around like 2011, you were approached by two producers, which is Connie and Jocelyn.
Yes.
And one thing for me that I was trying to work out in your journey was how did they approach you? Like, how did they find out about you? It's not like we had like, I don't know if you were on Facebook in 2011. I don't even know if it existed, to be honest. But how did they find you, and how was uh, that conversation? How did it lead to? Because this was something that they were proposing something for you to go on TV. Your childhood was like, God, I don't want to do anything like that. So just really interested. Can you just talk through that?
Absolutely. So Connie and Jocelyn was friends with a friend of mine now named Casper, and he's an event designer, incredibly talented and creative. And he had another partner. They were doing event design, and they would hire me to make cakes for their events. So Casper and Jocelyn were talking, and he's like, "This is a great show idea. You got to come see us." I started to work with them, and we would make sweet tables. So I'd bake a cake, and then everything would be color coordinated or coordinated in some kind of theme. And there would be a novelty cake, florals, linens. We'd rewrap chocolate bars in Japanese paper to match, and then all the sweets that I baked would match. And so Joss was like, "Oh, I'm going to come film you if you don't mind at your next event." So we did this big harvest table for a charity event at a beautiful golf course just outside of Toronto. And she decided to just film us as we worked. And then Connie and Jocelyn did what they do best and developed the idea, presented it. And within a year, it became a show. And you need to understand that myself, Casper, the other girl on the show, we hadn't even formed a business. Like they had a business and then I was me, and we just worked together to collaborate and do this. And here we had a show. So now we had to name it something. The other thing people don't realize is, I mentioned that my father passed away. My father had a security business. So we basically did alarm systems, and I lived in what I like to call Fort Knox 24 hours a day. Someone worked in my home in the basement monitoring people's alarms. And after he passed away, we of course sold the business, and that fireproof room sat empty for years. And I again manifested, I would walk in there and I'm think, I want to turn this into my kitchen because I baked cakes in my home kitchen. And that also became a problem because so many kids, especially doing bar mitzvahs, were allergic to nuts. So I couldn't declare myself nut free when I was just in our home kitchen. And so I did manifest and turn that space into my kitchen. And that is the kitchen that you see on Sugar Stars. It is also what you see on YouTube for the first six
That's the
years.
kitchen, the
I am
Fort
in my
Knox basement.
mother's basement. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. What a
Yeah.
purpose. How that ended up, that's incredible.
So on the show, they made it appear through the magic of TV that my kitchen in my mom's basement was in the basement of their shop, when really they were half an hour apart. And so I remember I was terrified of being on TV, But all I remember thinking was, if this is a chance for me to showcase what I do and how I do it, I'm going to do it. And I just thought it will bring me more clients. And at the time I thought, oh, maybe I'll get flown to another city in Canada to make a cake. Like, that was as far as that dream took me. But all I thought was, here's my chance to showcase what I do. It's not about me, it's about my work. And that's all I thought about.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's just such a beautiful way how that all comes together. But what's interesting about this story, though, is that I feel like this is maybe not the start, but this is one of those moments in your life where things aren't always going in the direction that you think it is. Because, for example, the TV show Sugar Stars gets canceled after
Yes.
10 episodes. Is that right? So you do a season and then they pull the plug on the show. So there must be this moment halfway through that experience where you're thinking, okay, I'm on a TV show now, right? My career is going somewhere. Things are changing. I have this beautiful kitchen now that I've managed to make out of Mum's basement. We're doing something. Things are really happening here. And then everything just shifts. So how was this a very abrupt thing? Were you thinking this was going to continue? And then how did you find your way working yourself through that crazy up and down moment?
It was a really hard time in my life because being put in front of the camera did affect me. I was shy. I really had to work on coming out of my shell. And TV loves drama, so they encourage that. And also, filming was a hindrance to my work because every time I was doing something nitty gritty, they were like, stop. Oh, can we get? And then they were putting lights over my cake. So all I could think about was my cake. And all they're thinking about is the shot, obviously. So that was quite an adjustment. Also, going from being all alone in that basement kitchen with my iPod to a film crew, a director, co-stars. That was such a hard adjustment for me, especially being a neat freak and a perfectionist. Like I said, even when the show ended or was canceled, I was upset, but I wasn't overly upset. I just thought, okay, I can get back to work because we shot Sugar Stars for 9 months. And for 9 months, I couldn't take any orders. So for the first time, I was turning away clients and actually referring them to other cake decorators. So now I felt like I had squashed my business. I wasn't sure about my reputation because here I am turning people away. I'm contractually obligated to be on this show. And so when I got back to caking, the unfortunate thing happened where, like I mentioned, the kitchen appeared like it was in the shop. And unfortunately, I found out via Twitter. I've never actually said this out loud to other people who know me know this, but people were calling the shop. They're watching a TV show. They believe what they see. So people were calling the shop, ordering cakes. And as it turns out, the other star of the show had hired freelance cake decorators, took the orders, and resold cakes to clients, and they thought they were getting my cake. And I found this out because the sweetest 16-year-old girl tweeted me a picture of her birthday cake and said, I can't believe my mom hired you. I love my cake. Thank you, thank you, thanks, thank you. And imagine here's me getting a tweet going, what on earth is this? I cannot explain the devastation, the surprise, and also I was angry on both fronts. I was angry that I had been cheated and lied to, obviously, but I was also angry for the cake decorator who made said cake and got no credit. And so what I ended up doing is finding out who it was. I DM'd the girl and I said, can I have your mom's number or can you have her call me here? I talked to the woman. She was lovely. I explained the situation. I said, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I actually made her daughter another cake for free and met her. She came to my kitchen and I gave it to her and I took a picture with her. And so I rectified the situation as best I could. And then I also reached out to the other cake decorator and we became really great friends. And she's super talented. And I let her know that this was happening to her because, again, I just said, as a cake decorator, you don't even charge enough. And now both of us were essentially being ripped off by someone who did not have the power to do what we could do. But when I say that I was so surprised by this and I never saw that coming, I was really hurt by this. I've never spoken about this in public. And I I think that was my first bout of just real sadness. And my husband at the time said, "You got to stop crying over this. You really got to stop." And we began 2013 with a trip to Thailand. We left January 1st and we went to Thailand for 3 weeks. And I just let it all out of my system and ended up getting pregnant there. So then my life took another shift because as when you're a cake decorator, you are married to your weekends. You spend the week prepping, decorating, baking, and then the weekend is all about delivering these cakes, right? And preparing for anything that could go wrong. And so I started to really think, how am I going to do that with a child? It was one thing when it was me and my husband doing it, but with a child, I need to be available. So I really considered shifting my life at that moment. During my mat leave, I made cakes up until I was like 7 months pregnant. And then it became awkward. I felt
Yeah.
very far away from them. And then I just decided to rest and take it easy and prepare for a baby. And I, my mat leave,
What was going through your mind at that time? What were you considering as other options to go down, or was it just a mass confusion and just, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'll figure it out?
it was a mass confusion. I think the situation soured me and I just started to think, that's been a great run. Like that, I had made cakes from 20 to 36. It was still a large portion of my life, but maybe I should get, there was always something in the back of my mind telling me, maybe you should get a real job. There was always that thought. None of my friends have jobs like me. So I just thought, okay, you're a grown up now. You're about to be someone's mom. Maybe you should get a real job. I actually considered applying there's a store close to where I live, and they sell cake decorating supplies, boxes, as well as things for weddings. And I considered just getting a job there, thinking I can just work 9 to 5, have a baby. It's close by. I'm really good at organizing. I'm creative, so I can help the clients decide what they need. And I thought it would be sort of easy and it would give me a better work life balance of being a new mom and having a job. But I was very sad at that time. And that's when Instagram really started to take off. And so just watching all these cake decorators and watching the world I love explode and cake TV, but not being a part of it was very hard for me. And when my son was about 8 months old, I clear as day, I was sitting on my couch over there. I was breastfeeding my son, and Connie and Joss called me, and they were like, we had become friends and remained friends. And they said, "Hey, what do you think about YouTube?" And they were tired on their end because they're creatives too, just in a different way. So they'd come up with TV ideas and develop them, and they would constantly be told no by the execs. And they got tired of that. And here I was at a stage where I wasn't tired of what I did, but I thought it was leaving, or I thought it was time to move on. So when they called, I clearly remember thinking, "Well, okay, I had nothing to lose." And I thought it would be great. I can make a cake here and there and we'll film it and I'll get to release my creative passion, but it'll be more manageable than being a full time cake decorator. And I was completely wrong.
Yeah, I was just
I
about to
was
ask
so
you that.
wrong.
Like the dream of being a YouTuber, like our 9-year-old, our soon-to-be 9-year-old daughter would be led to be believe that it's all incredibly amazing and absolutely brilliant. But as an adult, you can just see, just like we are self-employed people, I just see how it can consume you and overtake your life in so many ways. So, okay, your knowledge of YouTube at this point is zilch, practically, right? It's a
It is
fairly new
zilch.
platform
Yep.
at this point. Google hasn't really figured out what they're doing with it. Obviously, it's just, hey, let's just upload videos and let's just see where it goes. But there are platforms and channels, people on there who have some kind of following and were doing quite well on it. So I see the draw. But for you to say, okay, great, this sounds really good. Did you have any reservations at this point working with Connie and Jocelyn again? Or did you just feel like the timing was good to do something here?
I had no reservations. I adored the thought of working with Connie and Jocelyn. I adored the thought of you know how it is when you make cakes for clients, you have to make what they want.
Yeah.
So even though I loved what I did, I didn't always get to express myself creatively in the way I wanted. So what I loved the thought of was just making cakes that I wanted to make. When we started the channel, I had a bucket list of cakes that I had imagined in my head, and I was so excited to create them. So I had no reservations at all. And it was definitely naive of me because all three of us didn't know what a roller coaster ride this would be. And we were so blessed and fortunate because the channel took off faster than we could ever imagine. So I liken it to being in a rocket ship and we haven't even really strapped in, but we're going and it's really never stopped feeling that way.
I think Rachel, I know, would like to know a bit about your dynamic with Connie and Jocelyn, but before she gets a chance to ask about that, I'm just going to sneak in one more question here. I just want to understand, I think our listeners need to understand this, like the relentless work ethic you need to be consistent and deliver on a successful YouTube channel. I mean, as I understand it, you worked for so many years you barely took a day off because several days of production for a 12-minute video. You typically did not practice because it's not like you really get the time to practice anything. You are just go produce. So at what point into this process of starting and building this channel did you start to realize, when am I going to get the chance to take a break? Like, I don't, or is it too much fun that you didn't really matter too much, or did you catch on to that? Because you're a mother now, so
Yes.
you're balancing a few things. I mean,
Yeah.
how did you make this work?
When I look back, I'm shocked that I made it this far. I think in the early years, especially when my son was really young, I was just delirious. You know what it's like to be sleep deprived and hardly eating. And it was twofold. I was so excited to be back into my craft and discovering something new and then doing it with partners. That's another illusion of YouTube. I'm not really a fan of this whole like one woman show output. So we, from the beginning, were very honest. This is how to kick it. There's a team. You could hear Jocelyn behind the camera. I never wanted to come across as if, oh, I make these cakes and I edit this video and I do all the uploading. No, that would have been impossible. I could barely keep up with the cakes that I was making. But I really can't believe when I say there was probably a good 5 years of me doing nothing but making cakes and then being with my family and my son and always not really feeling fully present to either one. And like I mentioned, I was in my mom's basement. So my son was always in the arms of my mother, just upstairs. We'd break, I'd go upstairs, I'd breastfeed him, or we'd break and I'd go upstairs and I'd feed him something just out of that mom guilt that I really wasn't there. It I cannot believe that we did this. It's just all three of us, though, all three of us, because we were building a whole business. I know it appears like a YouTube channel, but
Sure.
Jocelyn was behind the scenes with all the marketing and like the brand deals. And if I would get an opportunity to go on a TV show, she was negotiating all of that. And then Connie was really building our e-commerce because what happened was as soon as people saw me use my tools, a lot of home bakers had never seen a simple syrup soaker bottle, never seen one before in their life. And so they were really curious to know why I used it, what it was, where did they get it? And so, of course, Connie was like, I'm going to find out where we get it. We're going to import it. We're going to brand it. We're going to sell it ourselves. And we were really passionate about selling to if we were going to sell to the community, it would truly be things that I used and was proud of and always had to do with caking. So all three of us were just engulfed in our YouTube channel at all times. And I think in the beginning, the excitement really kept us going because it felt like a fantasy. We didn't make money for a very long time, but like you said, it's consistency. And so no matter what, we were going to be consistent. And a lot of the earliest videos I was shooting till 2 a.m., 4 a.m. It was, like you said, I have a joke. I always say the cakes on my channel, for every minute you see, that was 1 to 2 hours because I'm making a cake for 2 to 3 days. We're stopping for photography because we're trying to keep on top of every single platform that there was at the time. So it's slowing down an already long process. And then here you are watching a 12-minute video of me really comfortable making a cake. So it appears much easier than it seems. I could see as a viewer why you would think, oh, she's just having the greatest time, right? But behind the scenes, I have a whole life. I'm a whole person and I have other things to do. And for a long time, that was my number one focus.
It sounds like this, it's almost like this perfect storm in some ways, that you were really dissatisfied with where you were at in your career at that point with your son at 8 months. And then also Connie and Jocelyn were both dissatisfied in their industry. And so they probably seemed like there wasn't another option and that you were going to go and really give this one a really good go, all three of you. And I think that's pretty unique that all three of you come together with that same determination as well, that we are going to do this and we're going to do it really well and we're not going to quit, because there was no alternative in a lot of ways. But I like Haf was saying, I'm really interested in the dynamic between the three of you because I think it must be a really special relationship. Like you're all still working with each other today. And during those 5 years of high pressure, high intensity, there were no breaks. It would be relentless. I'm just interested in that dynamic between the three of you and what makes it so special. And secondly, like when you did disagree, which would have happened like any normal time for anyone, how did you move forward? How did you move past that?
Sure. I mean, it has changed drastically in the beginning, and I often miss this. In the beginning, it was really just the three of us, and then we had Chet, our cameraman, and we had just a couple of other people. So we were constantly talking to each other. Everything that was going on, we all knew because we were pretty much in the same room, or at least Jocelyn and I were always in the same room, which was my basement kitchen. And so it was a lot easier to talk about business. Now that How to Kick It has really grown, we're all at different stages of life. And then, of course, we have other employees and a whole team. It's an awkward sort of separation in that how are we these same three people? But it's almost harder to have these conversations. We have to schedule conversations to talk about our decisions and where we're going to take the business and how we all feel about it. But I think what's really unique and I would say magical about How to Cake It, it was kismet. It was such perfect timing. You have three creative women who were tired of they weren't tired of what they did, but they were tired of the way they had to do it. And we found each other and we found this platform that we really knew nothing about and had to study. And we just did it our way. We did it our way. We did the complete opposite of what you would expect. Like I said at the time, cake TV, it's all competitions or at least some sort of drama. And I was very against that. It's just not in my nature. And I always say, when you're trying to control food, there's going to be drama because there's climate, there's all kinds of things that could go wrong. You do not need to add any drama to that process. And so I just wanted to be myself and be very real and make the cakes. I did have trouble on camera, which is why Jocelyn became another main character because I was silent. I would get so focused on making a cake and concentrating that I wouldn't talk enough. And then she'd try to prompt me, like, explain how you're icing or explain how. And then eventually we just left it in as a conversation because the truth was she was truly interested in how I was doing it. And she asked the questions that the audience would ask, right? I'm so used to cake decorating. I only speak cake language. So what I don't find valuable, other people find very valuable. I'm just used to it. So that dynamic was wonderful. And she became, I call her the Maris. I don't know if you ever watched Frasier, but we never saw Niles's wife, Maris. And that was like Jocelyn. Everyone heard her, knew her laugh, knew who she was, but had never seen her face. And that wasn't intentional. It was just to get me out of my shell and more comfortable on camera. And it really worked.
Yeah. It's like a perfect dynamic, right?
Like, were there moments though where you felt like things might have got? I mean, it's so good to see that for so many years it's worked so well because your business has gone through some crazy changes, pivots, COVID. I mean, we can relate to the fact that we sell something that was produced in another country and gets shipped over, and COVID just threw all that out the window, plus the economics of it out the window, right? and you're pivoting, you're switching to master classes, you're doing other things, were you always in agreement on these pivots and changes? Because they don't always go to plan. I mean, I've heard you speak about a very large opportunity that fell through somewhat recently for your brand and for your business. And, these things are really a punch in the stomach sometimes.
Yeah.
And you either just look at yourselves and you go, what have we done? Or are we going down the wrong path? Or you just all group together. So did you guys just were you like the chemistry was just always there to support each other, and just if one of you's having the bad day, the other two can come in and pick up? I mean, is that how it works? In my head, it feels like a real nice way of doing it, but I'm not sure if that
Yeah.
was the
No,
reality.
yeah, no, that's definitely how it works. I mean, obviously, we all bring something important to the table. I'm not capable of doing what Connie and Jocelyn do, nor are they going to jump in front of the camera and start making sculpted cakes. So we're very cognizant of what each one of us brings to the table, and we care. Like you said, scaling How to Cake, it has been the hardest thing. And the YouTube channel, although it was the perfect vessel and we call it the mothership, the reality is, would I be able to stand on camera week after week until I'm 90 years old making cakes? Probably not, right? Because as a creative, downtime is very important. That's when you get inspired. And when you take that away, it's very hard to be inspired. And so we had actually started a second channel called How to Cake It Step by Step. And we wanted to give other artists the platform to share their work. And so we started filming them, and we did that in Connie's condo, the kitchen. And that second channel was fantastic. And it didn't get the same views as my channel, but we were just so happy. We want to be the baking and sweets enthusiasts of the world. We want to be the platform that you come to when you want to know anything about baking and sweets at any level, right? And so when COVID hit, we had the idea of how do we do this step by step thing in another way? And that's how Bake You Happy came to be. Connie and Jocelyn talked about it a lot. And so the other teachers and instructors could teach live stream classes, and there was all different types of baking. There's cookies, there's macaroni, you name it. Whatever our audience wants to learn about, that's what we wanted to provide. And it was wonderful because everyone was locked inside. I mean, everyone was baking banana bread, apparently. There was flour shortages and butter shortages. And so you had people at home, especially with kids, who wanted to do something. And so it gave the world a chance to get back to maybe a hobby that they had left behind or had always wanted to try but never had the time. And now we all had time. And then on the other hand, it gave our instructors and our baking artists, our sweet artists, a job opportunity. Because just
Mm.
like you said, if you're baking for client, when I think about COVID, when I imagine what it would have been like for me if I was still making cakes for clients, it would have basically ended my business. There were no events. So it was wonderful on both fronts to be able to provide for our community and then to be able to provide for other artists with our very large platform and following and community. And I, as a cake decorator, never had a community. I started in a time when it wasn't very popular. I was really just all alone, thirsty for knowledge any way I could get it and to make cakes. And so it's so wonderful to know that I've helped create a community because I never had that and I would have loved that. And then even in 2021, we launched a bake book club. And what we did there is we had a book of the month. We'd feature a different sweet artist. I do a Q&A with them about their book process and their baking style. And then we started a private Facebook group for everyone in the club. And they would try a recipe and they would just egg each other on and really be each other's cheerleaders. And we stopped the club, but that Facebook group is still going strong amongst themselves. They still bake their own little community. They talk about books they love. And that is so wonderful to see. On the flip side, COVID was my sort of second, I don't know how to put this, midlife crisis. I don't know. Maybe this was my midlife crisis because in 2020, I had an injury on my neck and my shoulder from years of rolling fondant, basically overuse of the same muscles. And I couldn't even turn my head to the side. I was in so much pain. And so I had to start to do physio. And I was just so overly tired. I cannot even explain it, especially because with YouTube, it's an algorithm. And the hard thing about YouTube is once you give your audience something, that's what they want. So when we first started the channel, we wanted to actually do smaller baking projects to encourage community and baking and learning and do things that people could do at home easily, right? Without any stress and without having to own all the cake decorating tools that I own. But I think 6 or 7 videos in, I made a novelty cake, and I made something that wasn't very hard, in my opinion, a stack of pancakes, because you don't have to be an expert at rolling fondant, but it's a fun, creative way to make a cake. That video got the most views by far. So then what did we do? As YouTubers started to ride that train, and I kept making novelty cakes. And that gave us great success because although there was baking on YouTube, there wasn't a lot of that at the time. And so I think it was the magic of I mean, we were late to the game with YouTube. We entered YouTube after it was already monetized, right? So technically we felt like, oh boy, we're really late. And all the experts we talked to, I remember once in the first year, we had 2,500 subscribers and YouTube Fan Fest was here in Toronto at Dundas Square. And we met some people there and someone said to us, if you get to 5,000 subscribers by December, and at this time it was June, um, that's pretty good. Then maybe you should consider continuing. And we're like, okay, that sounds great. And in my next video in June, I boldly say to the audience, Jocelyn and I boldly say to the audience, I said, guys, next month is my birthday. And you know what? I would love 5,000 subscribers. So we boldly asked the audience to double our subscribers. And we went out and we even bought balloons, a 5 and 3 zeros. And we were planning to celebrate when we hit it, but just praying the whole time that we'd hit it. By midnight on my birthday, which is July 21st of that year, we had 100,000 subscribers. We got 20 times what we asked for. And it was funny because as we were carrying the balloons into my basement, the 5 blew away. It blew away and was like down the street. And Jocelyn, Chet, and I were like, "Oh." And Chet ran back to the store, got another 5. And after the fact, Chet said, that's an omen. We're not dreaming big enough. And we hit 100,000 subscribers.
That's amazing.
And that was amazing. And then we hit 1 million in just under a year. I think we were a couple days shy of a year. And so that really, when you hit 1 million on YouTube, especially then, it was hard then. It's even harder now. That's when everyone came knocking. Publishers, TV, that's when everyone came knocking because all of a sudden we were on this radar. And then it became really hard to juggle because the truth is we turned down so many television appearances because they're never in Toronto, just to keep up with the consistency of the channel. So in 2020, when I had the injury, I got really tired. I sat down with Connie and Jocelyn and I just bawled and said, I don't think I can do this at this pace anymore. We decided that because Bake You Happy was such a success, it was perfect timing. I could take a break now. I was really burnt out creatively in every way possible. And Bake You Happy was like the main focus of the business. And that was incredible. So we had reached a point where we thought, oh, good. We've gotten past this. YouTube is the only mothership, right? We're really scaling and growing and opening up to the community. And a month after I stopped, I got the opportunity to go on Crime Scene Kitchen. So I feel like it is really fated because if Crime Scene Kitchen had come while I was maintaining YouTube, I would have never been able to do it because I had to leave home for a month. So I would have never been able to catch up.
It's always that great fear, I guess, of just stepping off that successful treadmill as well and sometimes you have to be backed into a corner. Going through a pandemic, it makes you stop and realize and reflect. And then you're struggling with injuries and your mental health's probably pretty poor, I'm guessing, at this point where you're just exhausted by the relentless schedule and backed into a corner. It sounds like it wasn't going to be an easy decision, but it was something that had to happen. Was Jocelyn and Connie feeling the same way at the same time? Do you feel like they were ready for something new, but it just took one of you to go, right, I can't do this anymore?
I mean, I think we were all ready for something new. And I should mention, How to Cake It is a completely bootstrapped business. We have never had investors or anything like that. And so when it comes to scaling, it's really hard. We have such big dreams, but we need the capital. And so we all feel like in our own areas of How to Cake It, oh, I'd love to see this or I'd love to see that. But we can't possibly execute all those things simultaneously. We don't have the means. And I'd say COVID was a real, like you said, we were fortunate because we didn't have to pivot to become online. Think about how many businesses had to pivot in that way. We were online. So we thought, how do we capitalize on that?
So was that your hardest year, 2020? Do you think like at a point of burnout, injury, mental health, everything coming
Yeah,
together?
that was a really hard year. And I think it is a combination of, I essentially had two babies at the same time, Had to Cake It and my real baby. I was physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, tired of trying to keep up with an algorithm and an expectation. It's odd because I'm so grateful for our community. I can't even express it. I don't know how to express it. To think that millions of people watch me do something that I did alone for years when no one was watching is so hard for me to wrap my head around. But at the same time, I just knew that I needed a break. And I was very scared to take that break from the business side and from the personal side, because then I started to question once again, is this the thing I'm supposed to do? I don't know anyone else like me. I have had one job my whole adult life. I've done it in different ways, but I really only did the same thing since that day I tried cake decorating at the bakery, and I've never looked back. So I did start to question, is this the right thing? Or what's the next iteration of this thing that I love?
And that's so hard to go through as well. And I'm thinking that you had that same experience probably 8 years prior to that, where you just had your baby and feeling like, where do I go? And then you'd ridden this incredible success. And from the outside, everyone's probably thinking, oh, Yo's got this completely sorted. She's so successful. I wish I could be like her. And inside, you're actually crumbling and then doubting yourself again, going back to going, I don't feel good enough, or I don't know where I'm going to go next. Right. And it is a really frightening scenario going, okay, what? And it's almost that you have to let go to let new things come into your life, right? Because if you'd kept going and kept so tight on that, then you wouldn't have had these other incredible opportunities that were just waiting for you to take a break. Like everyone knew how amazing you were. It was just like, well, she's never free. We can't get
Right.
it. But I was going to ask you now that you're also working on as the judge on Crime Scene Kitchen. Do you feel like your years of doing How to Cake It on YouTube has really prepared you into that kind of into a much bigger role on live TV? Well, it's not live, is it? But recorded TV.
I don't think I was prepared for Crime Scene Kitchen. I have been on other shows as a judge, but it's always been as a guest. So I've been on one or two episodes, whereas this is every single episode. It's me and Curtis and Joel. What I love the most about it is I get to help people on their baking journey with my knowledge. So I'm not hurting my shoulder and grueling away rolling fondant every single day, but I absolutely get to help them. And meeting the contestants and what they say to me behind the scenes and what they've learned to me is so fulfilling to me. But it has really helped me come out of my own personal shell, because YouTube is different. There's one camera. I know the person behind the camera. It's our show, so we get to control the whole vibe of it. But going on TV, and where I have co-hosts and contestants and all these things happening, has really forced me to come out of my own shell and be comfortable in myself and be comfortable in my knowledge. And so for that reason, I really love it. I really love it.
It's really cool to see, actually. Do you, as far as your association with How to Cake It today, even though YouTube is not at the forefront, there's still videos that are being
Yeah.
posted and there's still content there. The website still has plenty of things to provide, from masterclasses to tools to all kinds of things. Where do you see that journey going for How to Cake It as a brand over the course of the next few years, for what you can share at least? Do you still see that there's room to develop and play around with, or is there something else that you're keeping to yourself that you want to work on?
I think that there's still room, but we are at a point where we are looking for some sort of partnership, something that will give us the runway and the capital to take this further. I do have a lot of television show ideas of my own. I'm highly opinionated on cake decorating and how it takes place on television. I have a lot of opinions on it, especially after seeing it live. So I'd love to create a show that had my own spin on it. And we also so I have I have 3 books. One is my first cake book, second
Yes.
cake book, and then there's a children's book. When we did my first cake book, we had a publisher, and that was a really it is the project I am most proud of to date because it was what I fantasized about that came to be. But it was a really difficult project because working with a publisher, I found because I make novelty cakes and the book was 21 novelty cakes, they went through the process with me as if I was a chef making regular recipes. I also can't liken my novelty cake book to even another baking book because let me put it to you this way. The last cake in the book, which is a lucky cat, has 53 steps. So I don't think they could even really process how it would be laid out and how long the process is. For example, I was adamant that each one of the cakes in the book, I had them listed as day 1 and day 2. So day 1 is like your prep day. I tell you how to bake the cakes, how to make the Italian meringue buttercream, the simple syrup, all the stuff, color your fondant. And then day 2 is the process of how you make it. And I had to fight for that because I didn't want to make it appear as if, hey, you can just whip this lucky cat up in a couple of hours one afternoon. No, you can't. If I can't do it and you've never done it, you can't do it. So I had to fight for what I truly believed in and learned a lot. And that's why the second book is self-published. So we opened a wing of How to Cake It Publishing, and self-published that book. And then we also created the children's book. And my hope is that there'll be more books, but not just from me, from other artists who want their own book. And perhaps I can help them because I do understand the world of cake decorating, especially in baking. And I want everyone, you know, to have to fight for creative license on your own book, especially after being in the world of YouTube, where we had all the creative license, we had so much
Yeah.
freedom. So then to go into publishing and have that sort of pulled back was really difficult for us. And at the last 2 pages of my book, we held a contest over Instagram. We called it Replicate because I have to put cake in everything. And what I did is I reached out to the audience and our community. And I said, recreate any one of my cakes on the channel, but make it your own. And then we included 25 winners, um, their picture of their cake, their name, where they were from, just to give them, you know, a bit of airtime. And
Yeah.
even that we had to fight for it with the publisher because they could not, they couldn't understand why would you want to put other people's work in your book? And our thoughts were we would be nothing without this community. The reason YouTube works is it's a two-way street, unlike television. There is a constant conversation and we listen because we care. And so we wanted to include them in that process and also had to fight for that, which we did. And I'm very happy we did because the number of people who entered, we had people make 10 cakes. And then we had a hard time choosing which one to put in the book. So just to see how invested they were in something that was my dream, of course we had to include them.
Well,
That's what YouTube is all about.
thank you for doing that on behalf of all the other cake
Absolutely.
makers, because there's so many books that you pick up that, and I'm quite a visual person, that are just text and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do here? Or all these, it's a very quick and easy steps. And that is not the reality, especially when you're making a lot of these novelty type of cakes. So thank you for
Oh,
going down the harder road. And it sounds like this is the path that you and Connie and Jocelyn have been doing for many years to create it your own way. And I'm glad that we have books like yours that are out there.
Yeah. And
thank
also, we We're just glad to have you on with us. It's been really nice to get a window into the behind the scenes of your life in a really realistic representation of what it's been like, because we try to hone this point quite often on the show. It's just how it's just not all sunshine and rainbows, and
No.
your incredible work ethic and determination, along with Connie, along with Jocelyn and the team that you've built, it's just really inspiring to watch and just hear how many ups and downs and no's you had to hear and growing out of your shell. I mean, it's an endless assault on your personal being. So to overcome a lot of that is really.
And it doesn't stop. You're at this crossroads now with your business as well, like where you want to go on this trajectory
Exactly.
of growth. And it's like, well, how do we do this? Right. And it's like
Mhm.
trying to solve these problems. It's just like one hurdle after another. And you get these peaks of waves of like success, and then it comes back down and then back up again. And it's like riding a constant roller coaster, but you're constantly learning. And thank you so much for being very honest and about your journey through, especially those lows, because we don't always hear those in conversation. And I think it's really important. I mean, we all have our lows in our lives, and how then do we scramble out of them and find something new and find the next challenge? And yeah, it's incredible. Thank you. But we do end every episode of our podcast with a quick fire round.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll go first this time, Haf.
Yeah.
All right.
Go for it.
Okay, so would you prefer American buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream, ganache, or fondant?
Or actually, we should throw in one more, because she does mention
Yes.
Italian.
Italian. Oh yeah,
meringue.
Italian meringue
Italian
buttercream.
meringue buttercream.
Italian meringue. Yeah, I love Italian meringue buttercream. Once I tried it, I never went back. It's the #1 recipe hit on our blog. But I also have to say fondant, because fondant gets a lot of flack, especially lately. And I'm not really a fan of the buttercream versus fondant. I think they're different. I think they're beautiful in different ways, but fondant is just a decorating medium that allows me to do the type of thing that I do. So I'm not gonna talk smack about fondant.
I'm just thinking of the watermelon rind on your
Oh, yeah.
watermelon cake.
Yeah, like the one
just
that-
things
the-
like that.
so many things, the texture, that just everything about it. And it brings me back to being a child. It was my Play-Doh. So
Yeah.
I like it.
Good old Walter.
Yeah, good old Walter. That's right. That's right. One aspect of baking that you typically won't compromise on.
Ooh. For me, it's execution. And actually with you, what's so hard, especially with novelty cakes, is you have to start at A to get to Z. But when you run out of time, what do you cut out? X, Y, Z. And X, Y, Z is what I'm passionate about. The execution, the final look. So when I have to edit down a cake based on time, that really upsets me. That really upsets me.
Can I ask, why do you bother cutting that down? Because you've got YouTube is long form as it is. So have you just
Right.
singled in on that 12 to 14 minutes as the optimal video length for your content? Or is that why? Or is there other reasons for it?
There is optimal length, but I'm talking about the shoot time, because between meetings for behind the scenes business, making the cakes, having an actual family. So if we slot in 3 days to make a cake, and at the end I think, oh, I could use 6 more hours. And that upsets me. And out of all the cakes on the channel, there's only one that I wouldn't change. All the others, every time I see them, I'm like, oh, I should have done this. I should have added this. I could have done that. There's only one that I wouldn't change.
That's amazing, right?
That's incredible. I'm still just floored that you really, because of your time, like you said, you never had a chance to do a cake before you did the shoot. So you're
No.
sculpting, you're carving, and you didn't really have too many accidents or cake fails, or you've got so much experience at this point that those are harder to come by. But still, it's just really impressive just to see, like, well, this is what we're going to do today, or this over the course of this
And I
week.
just got to make it happen, because I've got to get back up. I promised to my son. So it's going to
Yes.
be done.
Can you share,
Yeah.
unfortunately you can't choose your own, a baking book from your bookshelf?
Ooh. For me, it would have to be my cake decorating books. I love my Colette Peters books. I love, like I said, let me think. There was one, I had an Australian book, and it was by Greg and Max. I have it somewhere. and all the cakes were super novelty. I just adore the amount of time I spent looking through those books. And even when I look through them now, I just feel such nostalgia because they were my only inspiration. I didn't know any other cake decorators.
Amazing.
Amazing. So I'm wondering if one of the cake artists is going to come up for the next question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Who would you want to make for your next birthday cake?
Oh, my favorite cake decorator, and I don't believe he has a book, is Mike McCary.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right.
I just think he is amazing. I love his work. But truth be told, my tradition is ice cream cake for my birthday. I love ice cream. Everybody feels comfortable buying me ice cream because no one wants to bake for me. And that's why on my channel, whenever it's my birthday, I cake some form of ice cream, like a giant ice cream cone or an ice cream sandwich because of my love of ice cream.
Brilliant. I have one last question though. Do you have a favorite novelty cake that you've made from your YouTube career?
I do. It is my roasted Thanksgiving turkey.
yeah.
It is not the most colorful cake, but it's definitely a cake that as I was making it, I was thinking to myself, what did you get yourself into? And just thought it was not going to turn out. And for me, that's the only cake on the channel that I consider perfect. The way we styled it. I never delete it from my photo album on my camera. That's how much I love that cake.
That's
So for
amazing.
me, it is that cake.
It's very technical. I
Yes.
watched that video and it's a very technical and also just like all the precise detailing. So I encourage everyone to go watch that one because I was blown away.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. Personally for me and Rachel as business owners ourselves and looking how we expand and scale and grow our little packaging business into something with global domination, we take inspiration from what you have shared with us today. So it's just been really nice. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, world domination is the goal. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I didn't even say much, but thank you. I'd love nothing more than to talk
Well,
about.
then that just gives us an opportunity to invite you back.
All right. Next time I'll bring Connie.
Perfect. We'd love
She'll
that.
be perfect for the business side.
We'd love that. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.